All right. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Um, I am Celia Polman, and this is the Women in Construction Speaker Series. Today we have Robyn Niss joining us. Thank you, Robyn. I'll give you a little bit of background about myself and the program. So I'm a mechanical engineer at Thompson Consulting Engineers. We do MEP design work. And almost a year ago now, I had the idea to create a platform for successful women in our architecture, construction, and engineering industry to share their experiences, provide some useful advice and support, and then also just be a sounding board for one another and support us continuing to grow our voices and success in the industry. And so that's what started this Women in Construction speaker series. And today, our guest is Robyn Niss. She is Vice President and Professional Engineer with Kimley-Horn Associates, and she works in Virginia Beach with us. In 2023, she was named to Building and Design and Construction's 40 Under 40, a recognition given to rising leaders in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. And she was recognized for pioneering Kimley-Horn's large-scale K through 12 practice and her successful delivery of more than 50 K through 12 projects throughout Virginia. Her work has expanded Kimley-Horn's K through 12 market to include trade schools, multi-building campus projects in Virginia, and she's also brought adjacent education work, including bus parking lots, running tracks, campus stormwater management, environmental consulting, landscape architecture, land use planning, and much more. At Kimley-Horn, Robyn serves on their firm-wide women's leadership group, representing the 297 women in the Atlantic region, and reports directly to the board of directors on issues relevant for women at Kimley-Horn. Outside of the office, Robyn is a member of the Association for Learning Environments and currently serves on the board of the Virginia Beach Education Foundation. She's a mother of 2 young girls and spends her non-working hours camping at Virginia state parks, reading, watching cooking shows, geocaching with her family, and so much more. So I'd like to say thank you once again, Robyn. If there's anything else you'd like to tell us about yourself, about what you do at Kimley-Horn, feel free right now. Yeah.
Thanks, Celia. It's always a little awkward to sit through a bio of yourself because, I came to work, I came here right out of school and I did what was asked of me. And when more opportunities were provided, I said yes. And I took on different things. And so I still kind of picture myself as like the person who gets in AutoCAD and designs site plans. And so when you hear kind of all that stuff put together, it's a little disorienting. But, I've enjoyed a lot of success in my career. I've had a lot of great partners that have led me there. And so I'm just excited to talk with you today.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. I think your experience both as an engineer and then also leading a women's group within engineering really gives you some expertise to give to us that's really exciting to talk to you about. So I'd like for you to share with everybody a bit more in depth about yourself and your journey. What are your interests? What drew you to civil engineering? How'd you get where you are now? Just that kind of background experience that you've had.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm originally from Wisconsin. I grew up in a small town north of Milwaukee, and I was just always good at math and science. And so when it came time to go to school, people who were good at math and science go to engineering schools. And I had a couple summers that I'd spent up at a local, a small college up in Upper Michigan. So that's not the Mitten part of Michigan. It's like this bonus part. And right across the river from where we had stayed was an engineering college. And I just loved the community. It's about 6,500 students. Michigan Tech is the university. So it's about 6,500 students kind of in the middle of nowhere. And so it creates this bubble of people that are all kind of in it together. And so I just really liked the area. I went up and toured the school and they offered, all kinds of engineering. So I didn't have to pick when I went to school what I wanted to do. So I started school up there as an undecided engineer. I briefly went chemical. So I took a semester and a half of chemical engineering classes. And then we had career day and all these folks who work in chemical engineering came in and all of them worked alone in a lab. So like the most interesting person, which I did think was very interesting, they worked for Smucker's and they designed like new jelly configuration, which I honestly think sounds very fun, but in their day to day, they were in a lab by themselves creating things. And I knew that that just wasn't what I had envisioned for
Hmm.
spending my career, alone in a lab. And so I switched at that time to civil engineering. I had a really, really, really interesting and impactful internship where I actually worked for a land conservation department in Wisconsin. So I worked for a small county. They had two engineers and me. So what we did is
Wow.
every summer and fall, they would hire like a 9-month intern. So you'd come in the summer and you'd survey sites. And so most of our business was in designing manure storage tanks, which you laugh sounds not interesting, but is actually really, really important for the area because what's happening
Yeah.
is in the winter, when your cows need to use the bathroom, that water sits on top of the snow and runs off into the water. So it's creating all these pollution issues. And so at the time, the state had a program where if you would agree to store it in some sort of sized appropriate facility, they would help pay for some of the cost. So we were implementing that program. So we'd get there in the summer, we'd do all our own survey. They would be building it in the summer, so we'd be doing all of our own construction inspection. And then when the weather got cold, we were designing the ones that got built next year. So in
Okay.
9 months, I got to survey in the field. I got to do my own geotech. I got to inspect construction. I got to be in AutoCAD and design things. And I got to see that the things that we draw become real.
Real.
And it just
Hmm.
really hooked me on, this is the kind of thing I want to do. So I graduated in 2006. And at the time, everybody that I went to high school with had moved back to like live with their parents or like 2 blocks down from their parents. So I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go try something else for a couple years and then I'll move back. So my mom said, if you're not going to come home, can you at least move somewhere we'd want to visit? And so Virginia Beach is like a very
Yeah.
visitable town. Kimley-Horn came up to campus and they recruited me. I said, I'm open on location, and they sent me down to the Virginia Beach office. So
Oh,
what I thought would be a short-term stint ended up me just really loving the area and loving the thing that I'm doing and the people I'm doing it with. And that was 18 years ago. And here I am. And now I have a house and 2 kids and a husband. And so I don't think we're heading back to the Midwest anytime soon. But it's just been really fun for me to kind of, as it was a little seed of something I thought would be cool, to actually get to do it has been really awesome.
yeah, that's amazing. That's kind of serendipitous that you ended up here, but
Yeah,
how lucky.
absolutely.
Yeah. And I realized that I forgot to let everyone watching know that throughout this, feel free to ask any questions in the chat or use the Q&A function. Myself and Megan are going to be paying attention to that throughout. So we'll add questions here and there for Robyn. I've got some pre-prepared questions for her that we're going to be talking about for the first bit, and then maybe around 20 or 30 minutes left of the session, we will open it to more Q&A questions. So we'll focus in on questions that the audience has asked in the chat then as well. So please feel free to do that if you, at the Q&A portion, if anybody feels like they want to turn on their cameras, ask questions verbally, we welcome that as well. This is being recorded though, so we understand if you're not comfortable with that. It'll be up on our YouTube as well. So whatever is most comfortable, we like to have that discussion free flowing and any way that we can. So continuing on a little bit, so you definitely covered a bit about yourself and how you got drawn into civil engineering. That's funny to me that you started with chemical and switched into civil, because I actually started in civil and ended up in mechanical. And I feel like almost everybody I know starts in one engineering and ends up adjusting into something else.
Yeah.
And I guess I'd like to hear a little bit about your time in school, transitioning into working and doing what you do now. Like, there's a lot that you do that you don't necessarily learn in school. So kind of how did that transition happen for you? What skills did you bring?
Yeah, so I started here in 2006, and 2006 was a booming year for civil engineering hiring, so they hired a bunch of folks with me. And a handful of those folks came from Virginia Tech. And
Mhm.
folks know that I like to joke on Virginia Tech, but it is actually a very high quality institute. And one of the things they're really exceptional at is they have a program, a land development institute, that teaches people to do exactly what we do.
Oh,
So I came in and was sitting next to folks who honestly were better at this than I was. they had been trained in how to maybe size inlets and use the software that you needed. Whereas where I went to school, that wasn't part of the curriculum. We learned a lot about hydraulics. How do we figure out what the water's going to do? But the actual mechanics of using StormCAD, which is the system we often use for sizing, were not a thing I knew how to do. And so, in the beginning, I think it was challenging. It was challenging for me to figure out, is this a stupid question or is this the right question? I don't know what I'm doing, but is that because I'm bad at this or because I've just never done it before? And so those first couple of years, I worked really hard and I asked a lot of questions, and I had a lot of great mentors. So I worked for two gentlemen who really poured into helping me get excellent, and so when they would redline my drawings, it wasn't just, hey, change this, change this, change this. It was, your pipe slope is wrong. In this municipality, you need to look in their public facilities manual. So look that up and change it. So they were never telling me, hey, the slope's supposed to be 40%. They were saying, here's where the background data is, here's how to chase it. Or they'd be sitting side by side with me at my desk. They were never, hey, I'm going to do that for you. They were, let me show you how to do that. And so, I was able to grow my skills that way. And the first probably 6 or 8 years of my career was spent primarily in heavy production. So in AutoCAD, many, many hours a day with stormwater modeling software up on my screen, creating site plans. So that's probably the main deliverable that my team produces, is construction documents that folks use in the field. And so I was, designing the plans, drawing the plans, writing the specs, and those kinds of pieces. And then we had some opportunities where we had some smaller projects come in, and I raised my hand and said, I'd like to try managing these, not just from the how do we get all the productions done, but from the financial side. I think that I'm ready to start managing the financial performance of these and managing the team and be more client facing. And so, we had some kind of right-sized projects for me to take on that opportunity. And so I kind of added that to my repertoire. So I was still in CAD a lot, but I was also, in our financial management system and developing invoices and learning how to say to my, ask my client questions about invoices or have discussions about scope and fee negotiations. And then in 2012, maybe, the project manager that I worked most closely for got asked by our firm to take on a new position on the regional team. And so our regional team, our region has, well, I should know this, 400 or 500 people. And they kind of make sure that we have everything that we need and are really out of practice. So he moved into that role and he said, hey, I think you're ready to take on my project management job, work winning, work managing, overseeing the product and getting out of AutoCAD. And I was nervous about that thing. It was a big ask. He was significantly more senior than me. He was significantly more well-known in the market, but I thought, if he thinks I can do it, and looking around, there's nobody else better positioned than me to do it. And so I said yes to that opportunity. And so I started, spending most of my day figuring out what projects are coming up next, how do we position to win them, managing the scope and fee and managing the delivery of the team. And so that's probably most of what I do now is, hey, we have a project going on, who's working on it, when are we working on it, how are we going to deliver, how's the budget doing, and those kinds of things. And so it was really just getting really good at what it is that we deliver, and then either asking for the opportunities or saying yes when the opportunities were presented to me that kind of led to the spot that I'm in now.
Okay. Yeah. We've talked a lot in some previous sessions about like having that confidence to make that ask, right? And realize, okay, even if I don't necessarily feel like I can do it, if somebody else believes that I can, trust in that their expert opinion, right?
Yeah.
And then make that leap in believing in yourself there. And I think that kind of leads really perfectly into one of the topics we'd like to focus our discussion on today, which is receiving and giving criticism and feedback, and being able to receive and implement constructive feedback is very important in being able to grow your skills, just like you mentioned, to get really good at that deliverable and then get really good at that next step and continue and continue. So I'd like to have your input a bit on that importance and how it can impact your career and the advice that you have about taking feedback well and different points in your career too, right? So it's
Yeah.
different when you're starting out versus now.
Yeah, and I know when we had kind of talked in advance about, what are the topics that I am the most passionate about, feedback is definitely up there because I wouldn't be where I am without the feedback that I've gotten on how I can grow. And I
Mm-hmm.
also wouldn't be where I am if I didn't have the guts to give those who work with me feedback. Because if I can't sharpen them, they can't take stuff off of my plate for me to do something else. And
Yeah.
so both giving and receiving feedback has been a big part of what's led to my success.
Yeah. And Joe mentions in the meeting chat that mentors are a big part of learning, and it's important to be able to be open to listening and taking advantage of one's experience when you're a young person. It says that they're sure that you are a great mentor to others, which I'm also sure is true. Um, so what how do you receive feedback when you were brand new versus how do you receive feedback now? And I guess what advice do you have for others implementing feedback that they receive?
Yeah, so probably a year or two into my career, I was sitting at my desk doing some AutoCAD, and my boss came in and he's like, "Hey, I thought you had given that to George." George was our CAD tech at the time. And I'm like, "Oh, I did. There was a couple things that he didn't get taken care of, so I'm just cleaning them up." And he's like, "Well, why didn't you give it back to George?" And I said, "Well, it's not a big deal. Like, I don't want to, I don't want to get into it. I'll just take care of it." And he was pretty clear with me that that was the wrong answer. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
"You're putting your own comfort in front of George's development and in front of the objectives of this firm. You don't want to have an uncomfortable conversation with George where you say, 'Hey, can you finish these red lines? Why did you miss this one?' And so you're making a decision that is costing us time and money and stunting George's development. That's the most selfish thing you could do." And that conversation has really, I mean, what, 17 years later, it's still a thing that I think about fairly frequently, in that the guts to give somebody good feedback is a gift to them.
Yeah.
And so I've really internalized that both in how I give feedback, like I am giving you this feedback because I want you to be excellent, but also in how I receive feedback. People wouldn't bring me feedback if they didn't care about me. I mean, I think we've
Mm.
all worked with somebody who's like, they don't seem to care, they phone it in, they don't whatever. And maybe you give them red lines, but you don't really give them thoughtful, constructive feedback because why bother? Why bother? The people that you want to really pour into are the people that you know are going to be excellent. And so when people have given me feedback, I have really tried to view it through the lens of what a gift. What a
Wow.
gift that this person wants to give me this feedback. And so I think just having that mindset of, hey, this is something that that person cares enough to bring to me, I think has helped me kind of pull down my defenses when
Mm.
I receive feedback. And I won't say put them away completely. I am probably 2 or 3 months ago, I got some feedback from one of my colleagues. And so he's also a project manager. He's probably 10 years more junior to me. But in his check-in, like his annual performance review with one of his young people, they said, "I really don't like working with Robyn. I don't like the way that she speaks to me. And I find it disrespectful." And he brought that to me. I'm sure he was uncomfortable as heck having to come to somebody 10 years more senior to him and say, "Hey, here's what I heard." But he also knew that for our group to be really successful, for our working dynamic to be really successful, I had to change the way I interacted with this person.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got that feedback, it hurt my feelings. Like I thought that I was really supporting that person. And yes, I was giving them feedback because I wanted them to grow, and they weren't hearing it that way. So my gut was to say, like, well, if they don't want to work with me, fine. And it took me a day to put that aside and to
Yeah.
realize this is a gift. Like the fact that our, young people 2 or 3 years out of school feel like they can raise their hand and say, "I would like to have a different working relationship,"
Mm.
and give me the opportunity to do something about it is a gift. And so I wouldn't say I can always have that mindset the first moment I hear feedback, but I think it's really shaped my view of how I'm open to giving feedback. And then it's shaped my view of how I give feedback.
Mm.
Let's only give people feedback if that feedback is coming from a place of, I want you to be excellent. And not knowing this feedback is going to hold you back from being excellent.
Yeah, that's a really good way to reorient your mind because I do think a lot of people will become very defensive at first, but then if you step back a second, if as long as everyone is giving you that feedback with those intentions to grow you and make you excellent, then you can know that it's meant for your good. It's not meant to tear you down. But not everybody necessarily will be giving you feedback with that intention. So how can you kind of parse through what is important for me to implement and what is meant to build me up and bring me to that place of excellence versus what is maybe not given to me with those intents?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to start from the mindset of this person wants what's best for me, and it attribute positive intentions to people. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's true across the board. I think if you can approach, hey, this email comes off a little snarky,
Yeah.
that must not be how they meant it. Instead of, why the heck did they send me this email? I think that a lot of your interactions with folks end up in a better place if you can start from the assumption
Mm-hmm.
of this person's intentions are good. I think some of what I think you said mentioned that Joe had shared in the chat about just folks who have done what you're doing for a long time have a deeper reservoir of experience, and their feedback, I think can often carry more weight. So if the
Mm-hmm.
person sitting next to you who's been doing this for 6 months longer than you says, hey, you really should have drawn that differently, well, maybe you should and maybe you shouldn't. If a person who's been designing something for 30 years says, hey, the thing you've designed is not constructible, I'd probably weigh that a little more in my heart. So I think
Yeah.
kind of consider the source is maybe step one. I think there's also something to be said for, does this feedback, if I change my behavior or performance or whatever to respond to this feedback, does it align with my values and my ideas for my future?
Mm.
So several years ago, actually, it was probably right when my mentor was moving over into the regional role. I was taking on a project, and the client called my boss and said, Robyn seems pretty smart, but I'm just worried she doesn't have the gravitas for handling the public interaction on this project. And, I could have said, well, I guess what he's saying is I need to act more a certain way. I need to
Mm.
act less bubbly and more serious, or I need to act, I need to change my behavior and how I approach things so that I give a sentiment of gravitas. Or I could say, he doesn't know that I can handle this.
Mm.
I need to demonstrate that I can handle this in the way that I want to handle it. And changing my personality to be somebody I'm not, I know is not going to get me where I need to go. Being
Right.
a phony baloney of like, I'm all here for business, let's go, is not ever gonna get me where I want to
No.
go.
People
And
are
so
going to
I
be able to tell.
absolutely. And so I took that feedback, and I can appreciate where he was coming from. Where he was coming from is, I'm used to putting a white-haired guy up in front of the public, not
Mhm.
a 32-year-old lady. And that's a fair point. And so I had to develop a different style in response to that. And
Mm.
so did I suddenly develop gravitas overnight? Probably not. But did I hear where he was coming from and try to, make sure that I responded to that concern? Absolutely. And so I think you kind of just have to filter through, would responding to this feedback about the way that I carry myself or whatever change me in a way that I don't feel comfortable with? I don't want to come to
Mm.
work every day and feel like a phony baloney.
Right.
Or can I just pivot slightly to reflect, the things that is needed to deliver
Mm.
on this feedback?
Yeah, more so understanding the root of where it's coming from and
Yeah,
addressing that rather than changing yourself. Yeah.
absolutely.
Awesome. And Monisha asks if there were scenarios or instances where you were frustrated and wanted to give up rather than continue trying, and how you overcame that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I've mentioned a couple times that I worked for a person who really wanted to develop me, but he did this thing that was really infuriating. So the first probably 2 to 3 years of my career, he would give me a bunch of assignments to do, and then he would call me every day at 5:30 on his way home from work to go over the assignments that I needed to work on. And then I would work on them till 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night and go
Mm.
home, and he wouldn't even review them for like 3 or 4 days. And I thought, this guy doesn't respect me and doesn't respect my time. And what am I even doing here? And I got mean, really close to saying, I can't work here and I can't work in a situation like this. And I shared it with a friend of mine that I worked with, and he shared it with his boss. And his boss reached out to my boss and said, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? And he was like, oh, I am so sorry. I thought that talking to her at 5:30 without any interruption, so no clients were calling me, no one was coming into my office, was an opportunity for her to have my undivided attention. I never intended, I didn't realize she was staying late working because I'm not there. I don't know what's going on. And I won't do that anymore. And he didn't do that anymore. And it really opened my eyes to the fact that even 2 or 3 years into my career, I got to speak up and say, this isn't the type of environment that I want to work in. And so I
Yeah.
think that is probably the most frustrated I've ever been, but it's really helped shape other times where I've said, this is what you're asking of me is too much. I have too much
Mhm.
on my plate and I can't deliver and I'm going to burn out if you don't help me. And I go back to that moment of when I said, can you help me? People helped me. And
Yeah.
so I think it's helped me kind of avoid getting all the way to that precipice of saying this isn't what I want to do, because I had kind of an early interaction with, when you get to that spot, or maybe right before you get to that spot, say something.
Yeah.
We can't fix it all the time. If you say, hey, I really hate AutoCAD, it gives me vertigo, it's going to be very challenging for you to be an entry level person at Kimley-Horn. Like, oh, I take that back. We have a robust traffic department and environmental services department. They don't do AutoCAD. So I guess that you could be successful at Kimley-Horn. You couldn't be successful doing site design. And so not everything is, hey, I should get whatever I want at all times. But if something is not working for you and you
Mhm.
feel like you're getting to the spot where you say, I don't know that this is worth it, you owe it to yourself to speak up and say something about it, because nobody knows what you're experiencing more than you. Nobody knows
Yeah.
what you have on your plate more than you, or what you need more than you. And so I've kind of used that to remind myself, if I'm feeling at the edge of my rope, it's because I didn't speak up when I was, sliding down the rope. And so I think that just having that mindset has really helped. And I think 9 times out of 10, when I have brought something forward of, hey, this is really causing me frustration in my day-to-day life, the firm has been able to do something about it.
Hmm.
And the 1 out of 10 that they're not, I can at least get an understanding of why.
Yeah.
Maybe, "Hey, I'm getting really sick of working on this. Can I work on something else?" Well, because of where we are with resources right now, not right now. And hearing that and understanding that context has also been really helpful to me.
Yeah. I kind of hear a through line from that story also to your story about giving the uncomfortable feedback the first time. It's on the other side of things, like you want to avoid maybe burdening somebody else by asking for the help or bothering them, saying that, hey, I can't do this right now, or I'm struggling in this way. But the same way you owe it to your coworker to show them, here's where we need you to grow, you also owe it to yourself to say, this is where I need help growing, or this is where I need something to change in order to get me to that point.
Yeah, great point.
It's a very similar way of thinking of things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just think we all have more power over our own circumstances than we think, And so if
Mhm.
you're in circumstances that you don't like, say something. And if you're working with people that are not performing in the way you need, like, let's just talk about the things that we all need. And I have found that most of the time people are rowing together. So maybe our rows get out of syncopation and it feels like we're not on the same team, but mostly we are. And if I can
Yeah.
just get over my hump of, I don't want to talk about this, or this is going to be uncomfortable, or this is going to be a conversation that is, tense or filled with conflict, I have come out the other side feeling grateful that I brought it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And Joe also brings up that asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It's a way to care for yourself and improving your work. And Janice suggests it's actually a sign of strength instead. And I agree with both of those.
Yeah, I totally agree. We 4 or 5 years ago, a guy that worked here who was excellent put in his resignation. And I didn't work with him very often. He had done a couple things kind of tangentially for me, but I wasn't in his direct line. And so I'm like, hey, can we just grab coffee? I just want to find out what's going on. He's like, well, I've brought up 3 or 4 times that I don't want to do lighting plans. So he was an electrical engineer, and our electrical
Okay.
engineers do, site lighting and roadway lighting and signal design, all sorts of things. He's like, I don't want to do site lighting projects. I just find them really frustrating. I don't like the tempo. I don't like the whatever. And every time I brought it up, my supervisor would say, well, we'll look for different opportunities, but nothing ever happened. So I don't feel like there's any ability for me to stop doing lighting plans.
Mm.
And I'm like, buddy, in 2 weeks when you're gone, do you think we're not going to do lighting plans anymore? Like, do you think that's what's going to happen? That's not what's going to happen. There is somebody else. We just needed to find that person for you. I think the person that you were raising your hand to wasn't a person in position of authority to make that happen for you. Now, let me be clear. This is a shame on us story, not a shame on him story. He brought it up. He asked for help, and his supervisor wasn't able to make that connection for him. But shame on us that we didn't help him see that we could have solved his problem, if he had brought it up. And I think that, it was just a missed opportunity for us and a sign, kind of to their point, of strength for him to say, I'm not just going to resign and leave. I'm going to raise my hands and wave them around and say, this isn't working for me. And then it's up to, the firm to your supervisor or your team or your office leader to help you figure out how to navigate through that situation.
Yeah. And everything's tying back in together with giving feedback and receiving feedback. And we've talked a lot about receiving the feedback, but I'd also like to talk about advice that you have for giving that feedback, especially when you're newer. You might not feel like you have even the right to be giving feedback, but everybody should. And also, how do you change your feedback depending on who you're giving it to? Like, what cues do you use?
Yeah, so I will first and foremost plug my absolute favorite feedback book, which is called Radical Candor. So Radical Candor is a book about how to give great feedback. And it kind of uses this chart. So think of an X and a Y axis. And on one axis is how much you care about the person.
Mhm.
And the other is how directly you approach them. And so their recommendation is care deeply, approach directly, and give people direct, caring feedback. I don't care about you. I just need to be direct and I'm going to yell at you. I care so much about you that I can't be direct and I'm not going to say anything. Care deeply and engage directly. And so it was probably aligned with my natural philosophy. And then I read the book and it like crystallized my philosophy. So I will plug that book. But what I will say is to me, there's a couple different kinds of feedback. There is, hey, you submitted me this deliverable. That's not correct.
Mm-hmm.
And you had all the information. It's just simply not correct. So I gave you red lines. You gave them back and they weren't done. And so to me, that feedback is the easiest. Like, I'm just going to remark it up and put it on your desk. After the fourth time, I think is when it gets more challenging because I think it's a question of what is happening here? What is happening in your workflow? Can you walk me through your workflow so we can understand how we're getting here? And then I think there's the feedback that is, we have a lot of new people who don't know what they're doing. That's all right. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. As I mentioned, came out of school, didn't know anything. And so for folks like that, I think it's also easy to give feedback because we can see like, hey, I want to direct them. Like my job is to make this new hire excellent. They graded the ADA stalls with a 20% slope. Well, per code, it can't exceed 2%. So hey, let me just show you how this is. And those kinds of feedback to me are relatively straightforward. You had a deliverable, the deliverable is incorrect, let me explain it to you. I think where the feedback gets murkier is when it's on softer things. It isn't you drew this wrong. It's, hey, we're repeatedly talking about the schedule for when we're going to have deliverables and you're repeatedly not delivering. So it's more of a behavioral performance thing. And I think that feedback can be really challenging because it feels more personal.
Yeah.
And so, my approach there is just generally, and this is probably to your kind of specific question about like if you're the more junior person. I think in both of those scenarios, the best approach is to just to start with a question. Help me understand what you're working on so we can together evaluate if these deadlines are realistic. Do you think these deadlines are realistic? We agreed to them, but it wasn't complete. Can you tell me what happened? And so you're just kind of opening the floor for like, let me be curious about what got us here instead of approaching you to say, you didn't do what we needed to do to get here. And I find that kind of approach really disarms people because you're not coming in hot and saying, you didn't do what you were supposed to do or you're bad at this. You're saying, hey, hey, my perception is that we keep missing deadlines. Help me understand what's going on. And so I think that for a junior person in particular, that type of inquiry-based feedback can help avoid, I don't think, so I'm imagining a scenario where, you're working on a project and you're designing something and your supervisor says, hey, you should design it this way. And you have so much more background on the project because you're in the files all day and you know that they're wrong. And you march into their office and you say, absolutely, we can't design it this way because last week you told me that the top priority was for this to be located here. And you're coming in with this air of you are wrong and I am right.
Yeah.
And that I think can be really detrimental in any situation, but particularly in the feedback giver is more junior situation. And so I think coming in with the, hey, I saw you made this markup and last week you told me this, so I'm trying to understand how those two fit together, just diffuses the situation. And it leaves room for, maybe I didn't understand, maybe I gave you a deadline and somebody else gave you some work to do that I didn't know about and that's why you didn't make it. Or maybe the client has called you and told you about a change that you just didn't mention to me. And it leaves room for expanding your own understanding of the situation before you give feedback on the situation. And I think it also helps us get to a spot of we're together trying to solve this problem rather than I am giving feedback to you.
Yes.
And so that's probably the approach I use in most circumstances is like, let me just, and even if I know the answer, hey, 3 days in a row, you've left at 2 and now we're delayed. And we're Facebook friends, so I see that you went to the beach. Like, there's not to ask about, like, I need you to work harder.
Yeah.
But I find that coming at it with a question, just like I said, it feels more like we're on the same page solving this question rather than you're in trouble or I'm producing some sort of, feedback on high. And so I just have found that to be just a great strategy to kind of diffuse some of that tension. And honestly, there's been a fair number of circumstances where when I've asked questions, I found out things that I didn't know. I was coming in hot because last week you told me to put the pond on this side of the site and now you're putting it here and you can't keep changing your mind. Well, the client called and they have an issue with the landowner on that side, so we need to move it. Or you're missing deadlines. What the heck is happening? Well, my mom's been sick and I go over every day after work to help her, and so I just find that coming in with a help me understand mentality helps me avoid giving feedback with just my viewport point in.
Yeah, I think that aligns too with your comment about approaching everyone else's feedback from the standpoint of, this is from a good place. They mean well. Also, the people that you work with probably mean well and generally want to do good work and do it on time. And so if there's not, there's probably something else going on. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We do have a question in the chat about what if you give feedback but nothing changes? Does that mean you're not in the right place to give the feedback? That's kind of tough.
I mean, I think a lot depends on the situation. And so, if you give feedback to your office leader of, hey, the way that you're conducting the all office meetings is not very impactful to the young people because we're not getting the information we need. And they don't change. I think that could be because there's, 5,000 other reasons they're running the meeting that way and you just don't understand. I think it's reasonable to ask, hey, we had talked about changing up this meeting and you hadn't done it. Can you help me understand why? Like, I'm just a curious person who wants to understand why. I think if we're talking about a performance issue, if you're talking to a hire and they're routine, I go back to red lines because I think to me that's like the part of feedback that's the most frustrating to me. Like, QC your own work, please, I'm begging you. Over and over we've reviewed that the red line, you have to do my markups in full. You have to self QC. If you don't understand my markup, you have to speak to me about it. And they aren't doing that. I think there needs to be a question of, is there a performance issue here and you're not able to be successful here? And so I think there's just a broad spectrum of, why I don't think, because the question asked, does that mean you're not in the right place to give the feedback? I think that's almost impossible to be in the wrong place. I think everybody at work and at home gets to be an active participant in their life and the circumstances that surround them. So I can think of very few circumstances where I would say you're not in the right place to give feedback. But I could see a scenario where, hey, thank you for that feedback on how I should run the meetings, but this isn't a meeting for you. This is a meeting for 100 people. These 80 need this information. And so I'm sorry that, you feel like the first 10 minutes are a waste of time, but we need to appeal to everyone. But I would hope that you're getting some sort of, like, there's some dialogue on that piece. I don't know if it's kind of a tricky question because it's, hey, I think it could mean a lot of different things.
Yeah, no, I think you did a great job responding to that.
Also, for those of you on the chat, I can't see the chat only because watching the chat and talking is too much for my little mind. So if that didn't answer your question, you can just say, no, here's what I actually meant.
Yeah. If that didn't answer the question, type it in there. I'll see it. I'll let her know. There's also another question about talking about life-work balance and managing yourself, preventing burnout. You mentioned early on that you were working late until 7 or 9 o'clock to try and get stuff done. Like, how did you change that to be balanced, where you have your kids and you spend time with your family and you go hiking and you do all of those things that we talked about in your intro?
Yeah, great question. So my husband is a mechanical engineer. He works for Newport News Shipyard. And we did not live together before we got married. So we got married, we moved in together. And like the first week, he's like, wait, you work late every day? Because this was back when, only if you're old will you remember that it used to be that cell phone minutes were free after 9 p.m. So if you'd have like 400 minutes a month, but any minutes after 9 didn't count. So we talked on the phone mostly at 9 p.m. And so I guess I hadn't really articulated to him that, yeah, like most days I work until I'm done. And that's like 6:30, 7:30, depending on what I have to do. And he's like, this sucks. And I'm like, oh, it does? It seems fine to me. The balance that I needed was, hey, during the week, I'll just work till it's done. Our company works 4 9-hour days and a half day on Friday. Mm-hmm. And so, if I work Monday through Thursday till I'm done, Friday I can leave at noon and like go to the beach or do whatever I want, have a long weekend, whatever. And so I had to readjust that balance based on the fact that there was another person here. And so at the time we said, hey, he plays basketball. So he went to the gym Tuesdays and Thursdays. So he's like, how about Tuesdays and Thursdays, work as late as you need, but Monday, Wednesday, can you try to come home so we can have dinner together? What a reasonable compromise. And making that change, I thought would be hard. I had conditioned my team and my clients to think that I was always available, and now I wasn't going to be available. And it wasn't hard. No one needed me at 6:30 or 7. I had just gotten in that rhythm. And so I think it highlighted that, this work-life balance strain we put on ourselves is often because of the decisions we're making. Like I'm making a decision to check my phone every night at 8 p.m., see a client email, have to log on and deal with it and get worked up about it. Rarely in my circumstances is the client saying, it's 8 p.m., why haven't you answered me? I was putting that thing on myself. And so, I think just having that mindset. So now I have 2 kids, they're 8 and 10. They're hilarious and cool, and I want to have dinner with them. And so, I don't work much late at all during the week anymore, but I do maybe one day a week, I'll log on early in the morning, just when my email's kind of backing up and I'm feeling like I'm falling behind. I'll get up an hour or 2 early to just kind of clear the deck. I work a lot of full day Fridays. And so I've just kind of massaged my schedule to work around my life. And then, I like to go outside. Like my ideal vacation is in the woods. And the cool thing about the woods is cell phones don't work there. And so, I every year take 1 or 2 full weeks of vacation where I don't check my email at all. I have a great team. They know what to do. And I put on my out of office that so-and-so is in charge, contact them. And I tell that person, you can call my cell. If you need me and me answering your question will save you 12 hours of looking through the files, give me a call. But I'm not going to be actively seeking out work. And I think that really helps me rejuvenate. The other kind of strategy that I have employed is every couple of years, I take a week or 2 and I run a time journal. And so I every half hour of the whole week, I write down what I'm doing. And it brings to my attention that I generally have more free time than I think. And it reminds me that if I don't have time to do something, it's not because I don't have time, it's because I don't prioritize that thing. So between my work and commuting to work, it's probably, let's say, 50 hours a week. And I sleep probably 50 hours a week. That's 100. That means I have 68 hours a week to do whatever I want. And sure, there's meal prep and showering and grocery shopping. That's not 68 hours. Like, I watch a fair amount of TV. And so if I don't have time to exercise, it's because I'm choosing to watch TV. And that's okay. Like,
yeah.
And so I think just the mindset of I have the time to do things I want to do. Like, there are people who work 80 hours a week and train for an ultra marathon. Like, that exists. I don't want to do that, but that exists. And so I think just taking responsibility for my time and prioritizing, I'm going to make plans with my family and we're going to go camping on the weekend. And we're not going to cancel those plans. And I'm going to be home for dinner every day that I don't have a thou shall not miss commitment, or I'm traveling for work. I'm going to be home for dinner, and just prioritizing the things that are important have helped me feel like my work is just one part of my life. I have to work and I have to sleep and I have to go to the grocery store. All these things have to exist in equal priority, has helped me feel like it isn't a tension that I think can often feel really stressful.
Yeah. I think we've talked a lot in the past about, work-life balance is not really a thing. It's prioritizing figuring out what's important to you and how you're going to prioritize that, and balls drop here and there, but on the balance, you gotta have the balance. Yeah.
Totally.
I'm going to remind everybody that we've got about 10 minutes left to this. So if you've got any questions, please keep adding them to the chat. I've appreciated everything that you've asked so far. And I'm going to ask a question that we had from the registration. So it was from ahead of time. What advice do you have for women who are interested in engineering? So aren't in the industry yet, but are interested in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting when we talked at the beginning about, I think, both of us shared that I went to school for this, I thought I wanted to be this, and I really wanted to be that.
Yeah.
And so I think if you're interested in engineering, I would try to get experience with the things that you're interested in, because the field is really broad. Even Celia and I, who I think work in really overlapping industries, do very different things. But there are engineers who design site plans or building mechanical systems. There's also engineers that manage the traffic operations for VDOT. And there are engineers who create jelly for Smuckers.
Yeah.
And so I think just thinking about the kinds of things that you want to do, and then ask. I found we frequently have folks that come in for, a 4-hour afternoon to see what it is that we do. I think to really get a handle of, if you're interested in engineering, what part? And then you can ask the questions of, hey, how do I get into that thing? So we have a gal right now. She got her associate's degree in AutoCAD. She came in as a CAD technician, and she's already asked, like, hey, I want to do more. How do I do what you do? And so we've talked about, like, here are the things you can do with your current associate's degree. Here are the things that if you really want to take this to the next level, you'll want to get an engineering degree so you can become a PE, so you can stamp your own stuff. And so I just think, getting some real life exposure to when I think about I like engineering, is it, a person on TV engineering, or is it someone I know? And if it's not someone you know, find somebody that can show you what it might be like, and then ask them, hey, I want to move from where I am to where you are. What do you suggest? Because I just think the paths can be really different.
Yes.
We have a gal who does a lot of our work for one of our national clients. So it's a national retailer, and they have, I think I'm not supposed to say who it is, but they have put up signs in their parking lot for curbside pickup. And so they have different wayfinding. Hey, here's where you go if you're doing curbside pickup, et cetera. And all over the country, they're retrofitting their facilities to have those in, and she manages that whole program. So she has the same job I am. She's project manager. She's a history degree because she got into engineering in a different kind of way. And so I think there's lots of doors that you can come in, or you can even like crawl through the window depending on how scrappy you are. But I think asking real people in the industry, how did you get there, and how do you think I could best get there, I think is the best strategy.
Yeah, Awesome. Kind of along the same lines, is there one thing that you wish you'd known earlier on in your career? And if so, what is that?
Um, I think I wish I had known earlier on, that I can say no to things.
Mm,
I credit a lot of my success to saying yes. Like, I wasn't quite ready for this opportunity. You thought I was ready. Put me in, coach. And I think that's gotten me a lot of places. But I also think, kind of back to one of the earlier questions, that's what's led to the closest to burnout I've been, or the closest to I don't know if I can do this, is my plate was full and I said yes to something that I wasn't passionate about or interested in, or particularly well suited for.
mm,
I think when you say yes to a lot of things, you get known as the person who says yes. And so someone will come to you and say, can you take on this opportunity? And it took me a while to realize sometimes they're coming to me because I'm the best for this opportunity. Sometimes they're coming to me because they need someone who saw me first. And I need to ask where we are before I
yeah.
say yes. If you really think that I'm the best, can you help me figure out how to get some of these other things off my plate so I can do it? But if you're just, hey, we need somebody to handle this situation, and I thought of you, but it could be 10 other people, I can say no to
Mhm.
that. And it took me quite a few times of saying yes to things that either overextended me or I just wasn't suited for, but I felt like the thing I had to do was say yes, to realize it's sometimes a blessing to my partners in my company for me to say no and create that opportunity for somebody who would be more passionate about it or better suited to perform that role.
Mhm. That's great. I think that's really helpful. Um, we are getting pretty close to our end time, so I want to share with you that Robyn's Lessons in Giving and Receiving Feedback, a worthy New York Times bestseller, was a comment from Janice in the chat. So this has been really great advice. I think everyone's really appreciated it so far. Um, and I'll just ask you one final kind of unrelated question to end us off before I do all the outro stuff. What is your most memorable project and why?
So I've been thinking about this a lot because, spoiler alert, Celia sent me this question in advance. And I just have a lot of projects that I'm really proud of. I think that the one that just feels very defining to me is we worked on the project for the city of Norfolk to replace 5 elementary schools at one time. And it was a design build proposal. So we went in as an unsolicited proposal to do this project. And we had done all of the work to pursue this project when I was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months pregnant. And then I went on a maternity leave, and my boss called me and said, we were selected for the project. And I was in that part of maternity leave where you're still hormonal and like crying all the time and like, I was so good at work. I'm so bad at this. Why won't this baby sleep? And it was like, it just came to me as a beacon of here's a thing that I can be good
Yeah.
at and a thing that I could really look forward to. Coming back from maternity leave can be challenging. Coming back with something to look forward to really made a difference to me. And so we got to work on these projects, and it was a lot. I mean, it was the biggest project by orders of magnitude that I had ever managed. And I wasn't certain if I could do it. I wasn't certain if I could do that amount of simultaneous stuff.
Hmm.
And I was really intentional about here's the team, here's how we're going to stagger, here's our deadlines. And it worked. And then one of the schools is the place where my husband and I play kickball. So I
Oh,
get to
wow.
go there on Fridays and see, hey, I changed the grading there so we could keep the old lights. The new budget didn't have field lighting, but I knew that if I could keep the old lighting, we could still play kickball. And so the thing that I drew changed my Friday nights. And my kids play on the playground there, and we have some friends whose kids now go to school there. And so just seeing that this thing that, you know, I drew and I conceived became a reality in the middle of the community and changed the educational experience for thousands of kids was just, you know, it was so impactful to me personally at that moment in my career when I needed something to look forward to and something to feel proud of. And then it's just been really a cool, one of the many cool projects that we've done that has really made a big difference in the community. So I would say the Norfolk schools, and particularly Larchmont, because that's my kickball home base.
That's awesome. I love hearing those kind of impactful stories. Yeah. That's part of why we do what we do, right? We
Yeah,
we both work a lot in the K-12 industry, and I love seeing those kind of things happen.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much again. We
Absolutely.
didn't really get to talk about Kimley-Horn's Lift program, the women's group. So unfortunately, but definitely anyone who's wants to hear a bit about that, I'm sure they can reach out to Robyn. Megan might, I think she'll share our LinkedIn and a link about Kimley-Horn's women's group as well in the chat. So anyone who would like to hear more, please reach out to both Robyn and myself, connect with us. Part of the purpose of this is to have a platform for connections and, meeting new people and supporting one another. So we'd love to hear any feedback too. If anyone would like to recommend someone that they'd like to hear from as well, we'd love to hear that input. Any ways that this can be more impactful for you as well. Our next speaker will be December 18th with Karen Reasor. She works with JJM and she's a lighting design rep. So that will, all right, we've got a link for registration in the chat now. Please, anyone sign up and share it with anyone who you think would be interested in talking with Karen. Again, this will be recorded and the recording will be released to everybody who attended, but also will be on our YouTube channel. Please sign up, I guess subscribe and all of those YouTube things that I'm supposed to say that I don't really know what they are. But we appreciate it. Share it with everybody. I think Robyn, your input today has been invaluable, so I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time.
It's been really fun.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll look forward to talking to you again in December.
Thanks, Celia.